Well, welcome to beautiful southwestern Wyoming. What we're going to do today is we're going to show the effect of and the purpose of and a reason for various reach mends, curve casts, and just a water mend. So we're going to describe all those one at a time. A water mend, you land on the water and then you make a mend. A curve cast, you're making a curve out, sometime at about the same time as your rod stops. And then a reach mend where you're going to reach with your rod. And we're going to show you the advantages and disadvantages of all three of them in an actual fishing situation. So here we have a current. We go really slow here, fast in the middle, and slow on your side. So this is a perfect place to demonstrate both upstream and downstream mends. A lot of people think all they do is automatically, all you've heard is you got to mend upstream, mend upstream. There's a situation here where you don't mend upstream. It actually exacerbates the drag that your fly has. So the purpose of this whole thing is to eliminate drag. So let me show you just a cast to your bank without any kind of mend or any kind of a reach mend, a curve cast, or anything else. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and do a straight cast to the far bank, and you're going to see what happens. We're going to do a straight cast to the far bank and then do a on the water mend upstream, which is typical, and then we're going to do a reach mend to the far bank and then a curve cast to the far bank, and you're going to see the difference in those four approaches to fishing on the opposite bank. So here's your straight cast. Do it one more time. Oops, let's get it all the way to the bank. There. Now watch the belly. The second it hits, it's dragging. Look at that big belly downstream. Hits, belly, motorboat. Zip. Now you can prevent that from motorboating out if you do an upstream reach mend or upstream mend. So you're going to hit here and your guide yells at you, or you remember upstream. So we're going to get close to the bank, get closer. That's good. Now we do this. What happens? You've corrected the belly, there's no doubt, but what happens to your fly? You're no longer fishing for a fish downstream near the bank. So what we need to do, this is a belly, by the way. This big thing right here is a belly. Anytime you have a belly, if you want to drag-free drift, let's do it again so you can see it. That's a belly. We got to get rid of the belly with some kind of a mend or a reach cast. So now let's do the same thing. I'm going to count how many seconds that fly remains at the speed of the same current if I just cast straight across. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, whoosh, there it goes. 4 seconds and it's gone. 4 seconds and it's out of there. Now here's a reach mend, and in chapter 2 you can learn the mechanics of a reach mend. Here's a reach mend. Not quite as far, so it's a little bit cheating. We'll try to get it a little bit farther over. Didn't really reach that good. Try one more. (1001), 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Whoop, 7 seconds before it takes off. Now watch a curve cast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 seconds before it takes off. So the whole idea of the curve cast gives you considerably more, a better mend. Watch now, I'm going to do the curve cast and I want you to watch what happens to the belly. I'm taking the belly out. As a matter of fact, I'm creating an upstream belly in the middle of the cast so that as that faster water pulls my line, it doesn't pull the fly. So watch this. Watch just the center. There's the belly. Look at that belly. Now I could add another belly, add another mend, and keep that fly almost on the bank for quite a few feet. A reach mend is the same thing, but it doesn't create quite as dramatic of a compensation unless you're going way downstream. You can see that that's going to be a little less. Now it's going to drag. Still, the reach mend is easier. That's an easy reach mend, and it still gives you a lot more drift on the opposite bank. So my suggestion would be to learn both of those two. Now I want to talk about one other thing before we come back over on this side and talk about a mend downstream, because on this side we need to mend downstream to get a good drift. Here's our problem with a reach mend and a curve cast. That goes right to the bank, right there. The problem is, if I do a reach mend with that much line, look what's going to happen. It's going to be way out there. So I have to either cast more line to start with, because remember, I'm taking 10 feet of line out when I move my rod back to here. So my rod was here, I move it back to here, I'm taking 10 feet out. So I need to compensate for that 10 feet. I can either cast farther, which is one thing I can do. So I could just hold up line way up here and do it. That would compensate. But then you're scaring fish, and if there's bushes or trees behind your target, you're going to hit them. So this is where you need to learn to shoot or feed or extend line, depending on the vocabulary that you're used to. That also is in Chapter 2 and in Chapter 1. Extending line. So you can see, look at all the line I have. Got all this line. I'm going to make my false cast and then extend or shoot all this line so that my fly lands near that bank. There it goes. It's all gone. So what that does is allows me to make a good cast. I'll do a curve cast over there. Same thing. All this line. Went a little too far and hit the bank. Let's try it again. There we go. A little short, but you can see I shot all the line. There, that's a good one. All the line gone, long drift down on the other side. We're going to talk about this kind of mending in another lesson. So that's the curve cast, the reach mend, and the regular cast or the on-the-water cast. And you can see the advantages of making sure that you try to learn a reach mend at the minimum and a curve cast at the maximum. Also remember two things. You're going to have to shoot line in order to get to a target far away with stuff in the back. And not only that, the farther downstream you go with this thing, the more dramatic the effect. The farther straight across you go, the less dramatic the effect. So if I wanted to go way downstream, that's going to be much more effective than a straight across. Straight across, even with a curve cast, I get a little bit of compensation, but it's going to catch it sooner or later. The farther downstream I go, the more I compensate for this current. And I can also do this, which we're going to talk about in another chapter. I can keep that thing pretty much going on the other side of the river for 20, 30, 40 feet, depending on the angle. Okay, so that's it. We're going to come back over to this side of the river, and we're going to show why we would sometime want to do a downstream mend, a downstream reach, or a downstream curve cast. So what we're going to do now is talk about a reach mend or a curve cast or a mend, a water mend, downstream instead of upstream, because in this particular situation, an upstream mend actually exacerbates all the problems with drag. So you're going to see I've got a bunch of slow water right here, and I'll demonstrate that in a second. Actually, it's almost still water. And then out there not too far, maybe 30 feet, is a very fast current. So what happens is, if I cast straight out to that fast water with a straight line, it's not going to take very long before this slow water stops that. It's already dragging. I don't know if you can see the bubbles, but that thing is already dragging. So if I were to actually cast upstream in this position, it would drag even sooner because this thing's up there quick. Now it's going to drag almost immediately. So now it's already going slower than the bubbles. It may be hard to see at your angle, but take my word for it. So here we go. So instead of doing this, if I look at that fast current, and then I look at this, slow, 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 it's going to eventually, in this case, I've got enough slack in there, it's going to go away. But even now, it's slowing down. Even now, that yarn is going slower than the bubbles. And if you've got the kind of hatch that requires an insect to go at exactly the same speed as the current, you're not going to get any hits. So the object is now, we're going to have to mend downstream. So one option you have is you can do the water mend right that and just mend. You're still going to pull your fly, but at least it's in with the current and it's going to go a lot longer. So you can, here, mend, 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 and you get a pretty good drift right with the bubbles all the way down until at some point you're out, but you're going to be out anyway. So that's one idea, you can do it. The problem is you tend to pull your fly again from its initial target. So in this case, you could cast way over, then mend. Let's try it again, a little too much oomph. Mend. Okay, now you're going to get a good drift in the middle because you cast beyond where you wanted to actually fish. And now that fly is going with the bubbles the whole way. The other option is you can reach mend to the left. So you're going to come up here. I want to have a good drift from there down to here. Pretty hard to do unless you're reach mending or curve casting. So here I am. There, I reach mend, and you can see now my line is way down here, and it's going to go with the bubbles all the way down. So I get a huge, probably a 30-foot long drift perfectly with the bubbles. Matter of fact, it's still going, now it's dragging. So it just started dragging. So that's probably more like 40 feet. So reach mend, same thing, check chapter 2 out if you want to know how to do it, but it's here and here. So there's my reach mend. Very effective, but I'm reaching downstream to compensate for this dead water. I can also do a curve cast that way. Curve cast, you can do a couple different curve casts. You can learn these in chapter 2. One is an overpowered curve cast off the off shoulder. And now I've got the same basic thing as a mend, but a much more steep. There's a right angle turn, but I'm going to get the same effect. It's going to be a drag-free drift. If I've got a bunch of stuff behind me or over here, and I can't do a side-armed, I can't do this to get my curve, I'm going to have to do an overhand. But I can still do the same thing. So there's an overhand curve with my line up, but it's exactly the same line configuration we just had, except for my rod is up in the air. And again, in chapter 2, I consider that one probably one of the most, it should actually, that's an advanced cast, but we're going to include it in chapter 2 along with the rest of the curve cast. So I would strongly suggest you take a look at that because it's very valuable if you've got stuff overhead or behind you. This, if you've got bushes behind you, you can't do it. This, doesn't matter if you have bushes, you can still do it. But it's a little bit trickier. It requires more finesse on the part of your arm. But you can see the distance that you cast. It's the same thing as we talked about before in terms of shooting. Sometimes if you're so far away you just can't get there, you might have to shoot. For instance, if I wanted to cast way up here, and it's kind of out of your frame, but right there, if I want to cast on the far side of the river, way over here, you can see that I'm going to need to do a reach mend. I'm probably going to have to shoot line in order to get over there very effectively. And then you can do another mend, which we're going to show in another lesson. And there we go. We get this big drag-free drift right down the middle of that hole, and it's long. Without reaching and without a curve cast, you just don't get as long. Watch that. It's going. Now it's going to start dragging. There we go. Starts dragging across the river. You just don't get quite as long a drift as you would ordinarily. And here it's even worse because your line is upstream and your fly is downstream, and so now it's going to go about halfway and all of a sudden this slow water is going to stop it. So you get a much slower drag, much shorter drift. But again, just the biggest point of this whole video is to make you to understand the second half of this video is there are sometimes you need downstream mends. What is the purpose of a downstream mend? What's the purpose of any mend? What do we have here? We have a belly facing upstream. We want to get rid of that belly, and that's going to give us a longer drift. So anytime we have a belly, whether it's on the other side or this side, as soon as we see a belly, there's a belly forming out there. It's a small belly, but it's a belly between the end of the fly line and there's a belly. You can see it. I've got to compensate for that belly. Now I've compensated for the belly and I've gotten longer drift. Here, I've got a belly here. I need to compensate for this belly, either on the water or in the air, but it's got to be compensated for if you want a drag-free drift.